A while back I wanted to create a space movie and I was gonna do it inside of Blender. Looking back I realized that some of the shots are pretty janky, but there are some gems in there that I want to share with you. Alright, so the movie is sort of like a budget version of Gravity, and it called for scenes both inside the space station and floating in space. I also needed to somehow put myself into a spacesuit, so I had to find a workflow for that. Spacesuits are kind of boxy, but also a bit like fabric, so I used boxes, remeshed it, and then played around with some cloth simulation to get the fabric look. To have it inflate like this, I used the pressure and shrinking factor. A negative value here will expand your mesh. I repeated this a bunch of times and used sculpting to touch up some parts manually. To get transparent glass in Eevee, you can turn on screen space reflections, refraction, and then give your material transmission, bring the roughness to 0, and finally check screen space refraction here. I use this all of the time for my Eevee renders, but keep in mind that it's still kind of faking transparency, so it won't be able to handle many transparent materials on top of each other, for example. Using cycles for this wasn't really an option though, because I needed speed, and you kind of get what you pay for in render times. Tracking the suit by hand sounded like a job I did not want to do. Instead, I put some markers on this backpack and wore it on my chest like this. Then all I had to do was to create a new object track in the motion tracking workspace, add a bunch of tracking points, track it, and hit solve object motion. For those of you who are familiar with camera tracking, this works exactly the same, and there are a bunch of tutorials on this on YouTube. Then we can use this tracking data by adding in an object solver constraint, move and scale this object until it visually matches the shot, and now I have this cube stuck to my body. All I did then was to parent the spacesuit to this cube, project my face back onto a sphere inside of the helmet, and it looked like I'm wearing a big clunky spacesuit. The really cool part here is that the arms don't even have to line up at all, since we won't be seeing the original footage through the suit. This was great because it allowed me to create these inverse kinematic interactions with the environment, such as with the helmet here or this rotating thing. So I just used the original footage for reference and then animated everything else by hand. I've always liked the idea of zero gravity, so it was a pretty fun challenge to create these shots inside the space station. I used this pulley system that I had lying around and mounted it to the ceiling like this. Then I hooked it up to a climbing harness and my stunt rig was finished. We used this rig for all of the shots where someone had to be suspended in the air, and apart from the bad keying here, it actually turned out pretty convincing. If I had to redo these shots today, I would probably cut a hole in my shirt for the rope to go through to help with cleanup in post. Because now I had this big bulging in my shirt and I had to mask it out and paint it in again, and it was just a pain. Another problem that I had with the keying was that my white pants caught way too much green spiller light, so that kind of messed up the key a little bit. I'm honestly not sure how you would solve that issue apart from wearing darker clothes. One idea would be to black out the parts of the green screen that weren't absolutely necessary, such as the floor in this shot, and that might remove some spill. Another pretty cool method that I'm sure you have seen from Ian Hubert's videos is that you can treat your pre-keyed green screen elements like objects in actual 3D space. In this scene I wanted to put another worker in the background here to make it feel like the station wasn't completely empty. So I convinced one of my friends to get hooked up to this rig and act out this waving motion here. Since we filmed it with a stationary camera, I could just key it in my compositing software and import it as a plane into Blender. Then I matched the size and placed him in the corridor like this, and I'm not actually traveling forward here. I just tracked the shot and then keyframed some camera motion on top of that to have me float through the space station. This is one of the shots that I'm really happy with, especially with my friend in the background. I think it's pretty convincing. So thank you, Mr. Hubert. Alright, there's one last thing that I want to show you that I learned in this project and have been using ever since. For the re-entry shot, I wanted to create this plasma effect that wrapped around the shuttle once it hit the atmosphere. So I simulated two assets, one with fire and one with sparks, both emitting from the center of the screen like this. Then I used that video as the emission value on a plane, subdivided it and wrapped it around the shuttle like this. To give the illusion that it was interacting with the shuttle, I created a collision object with the remesh modifier and parented it to the original shuttle. Then I shrink wrapped the plane to this collision object and it looked pretty cool. This method of using planes is dirt cheap on your render times, and I used it here, here and here, just to name a few. Anyways, that was my sort of breakdown of the things I learned from this short film. Let me know if you have any feedback on some things I could have done better, so I can keep that in mind for future projects. Thank you guys for 19k subs, that's pretty insane to me, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.